The art of the big fish. And the big fish is down there in the red tie. I'll get to him in just a second. But we're here to talk about one of the major themes of SphinxConnect, the connect part of SphinxConnect, in fact, the art of networking. And I'm joined by sort of three really innovative musicians and arts leaders who are literally circling the globe with their networks today. And we're going to talk about sort of what they do and how people power helps make what they do possible. We have Stephanie Matthews here in the middle, with two violinists right here. So Stephanie freelances literally from coast to coast. She teaches with the Sphinx Performance Academy, but she's also the founder of her own business, String Candy, a multi-platform cross-genre. That's you like it? You can use that, yeah, multi-platform. Music entertainment company. She's worked with some pretty cool people. There's Ava DuVernay, you may know, the director of Selma. Someone named Rihanna. Someone named John Legend. And someone named Hans Zimmer. So some pretty awesome people. Kyle Lombard here is on my left. A violinist, his teacher at Washington University in St. Louis. Kyle has literally been around all of the United States, Europe, and the Middle East as a soloist. Recitalist, chamber musician, orchestral player. And then the big fish down at the end, sort of batting cleanup. Ken Fisher, good friend of mine from the University of Michigan, longtime president of the University Musical Society, got his start in Washington, D.C., and really for the last 30 years has been just a key element to invigorating the arts here in Southeast Michigan, if not across the country and around the world. So Ken has received basically an award from every arts organization on the planet, as far as I can tell. And he's served on the board of all of those organizations almost. So he'll talk a lot about why, I think all of our panelists, about why getting involved with others and giving back is also a way to helping and propelling your own career. So I've asked each of our panelists to sort of kick us off here by sharing a story from their own life, just about how people power, how networking has really, helped inspire them or made something possible. So, Stephanie, you want to start us off?
Sure. Okay. Well, I feel like my career and my life as a whole has been a little out of the box. So the story I'm going to share is a little out of the box. And it actually started in Detroit. I was a semifinalist with the Sphinx competition. This is a true story. And I was carpooling with a friend of mine who went to Indiana University at the time, Shelby Lattin, who is now Shelby Harris, who is also an entrepreneur of And Popcorn. Fantastic, fantastic popcorn company based in Chicago. But anyways, she's also a violinist, and we were leaving the competition and drove past Fox Theater and saw Erykah Badu and Flowetry, some of my favorite artists, R&B. So we were like, do you mind if you pull over and we go to the concert, maybe? And so her mom, she was just like, she was kind of tired, but she was like, okay, fine, whatever. So we had this grand idea. We're dressed in our, in our gala clothing, formal black. We had our instruments, so we kind of looked at each other like, should we try to sneak backstage? Maybe we could play with them? I'm not sure what we were thinking, but we snuck backstage. This is not a suggestion. I'm just sharing my personal story. So I snuck backstage.
How to get arrested at SphinxCon, right?
Yeah.
That was excellent.
Yeah, so anyways, needless to say, when we were back there, of course, the stage manager was like, we definitely don't have violinists on the show. But we happened to see on the itinerary that they were going to be in Indianapolis. So we made a plan that we were going to come after our classes, drive up to the Murat Theater and try it all over again and see if we could meet Erykah Badu. So this time I came equipped and I brought my demo CDs, which were actually my recordings for the Sphinx competition and my prep CDs for my grad school auditions. You have to submit recordings for admission. And so I brought a couple of copies. And so I just gave some to Shelby, here, they probably won't know the difference, just give them this and say this is your stuff. So I met a guy who was a singer-songwriter. At the time, he was working with Erykah, doing auxiliary keys. And he wanted a musician for his debut album. So he asked me, do you write? Now, I just said, yes, of course I write. Not really thinking of the implication of that. So I was very good at theory. I was very good at counterpoint. I'm very good at, playing by ear and being able to write by ear. So I said yes. So he was like, do you have any information? So I kind of, I'm like holding on to it because I'm like, I really want to give this to Erica. But I gave him, my information. So he was like, okay, well, I'll listen to your stuff and, I'll get in touch with you. So he listened through whatever it was he listened to, which was totally not R&B, by the way. It was purely classical repertoire. And then he flew me down to Atlanta to record his first album. And at that point, I was terrified because I was like, he's gonna find out I'm a fraud because I've never done this before. And anyways, fast forward, I've worked with him on 5 albums now, and he is now the newest member of Maroon 5, PJ Morton. The black guy in Maroon 5, yes. There's only one. So anyways, for me, that was such a door opener because that relationship landed me on tour with Kanye West. The music director who was going on the Glow in the Dark tour needed someone who could write on the spot. He got my number from PJ and he was like, I loved what you did on the Emotions album. We need someone that can go on the road and write. And that placement, that Glow in the Dark tour placement, opened the doors and allowed me to be in a position to start a company like String Candy. So that was, yeah. Non-traditional can sometimes work.
Kyle, why don't you tell us your story?
Cool, I get to follow that. How fun. Well, I thought about telling a story more about how one connection becomes fruitful, and I'm glad that I see a lot of SPA graduates and participants from last summer because it's the younger folks I wanted to get to a little bit. If I had to sum it up, I would say, take the shot and go for it because you never know who's going to be there. You never know what that one suggestion is going to do for you. So Aspen Music Festival, after my junior year at Indiana, a good buddy of mine, he was going to study with this quartet guy. Didn't really know much about him. He's like, he's the best teacher. I can't wait. His name's Peter Ungen. He played with the Tokyo String Quartet. I was like, oh yeah, I've heard of them. Cool. So then, I'm looking at everybody in their last year of undergrad. You're playing for whoever, thinks, you're interested in studying with. They want to take you. And so I drove to CCM where he taught as well as Yale. And that's where I did want to go, where he studied, or he taught full time and played for him, played terribly. He called my teacher, Miriam Freed, and he said, oh, well, I don't, have him come take the audition anyways. Played a great audition. He took me. So fast forward 2 years. Now, I don't know if any of you know Peter Ungen, but he had focal dystonia in his left hand, so he had to retire from the quartet. And so in the meantime, as he saw that end of his career coming, he took up conducting. And fast forward about 6 months, and he says, well, I'm canceling lessons because I got a huge break. I'm going to St. Louis to fill in for Maris Janssens, who was getting very, very sick and canceled. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm from Kansas City, Missouri, actually. I'd never really been to St. Louis. And he comes back. I was like, how was your week? He's like, great. And he's like, I formed a good relationship with the concertmaster, this guy named David Halen, who you know very well. And he asked me if I had any students. And I thought of you. I was like, oh, well, that's cool. And so he's like, well, I'm going to give you his number. They have an audition for a 2-year position coming up. And I was like, okay. And so next year, I'm there, and I've been there ever since. And I guess the point is that, in the business of ours where, every performance seems to make or break your psyche for that week, month, 6-month period, year, you're always in a position whether you can turn around and run or you can just dive in. And even in a place, that you have no familiarity with, just go for it because you never know, that one friend of mine from Aspen Music Festival, made a recommendation that I knew nothing about, and I took the shot, and investigated, and best choice I ever made. And I have all these notes here. I haven't looked down once. But, the doors opening they're doors that you never see. Chamber music, teaching. When I first started playing in an orchestra, I thought I'll never have time to teach. I'm not interested in it. And then you realize how much better it makes you as a player when you start to tell someone how to do what you do, because you start to think about it, and the cerebral nature of it becomes second nature, and then you realize that, wow, it's making me better every time I reinforce these playing values to someone who's really trying to learn. So I think that's about it.
If we can move some of these things from the front row, there are people in the back standing, so there's room for 3 of you up here if you want to come up to the front row. That's a piece of advice I have. Just when you come into a room, sit in the front. Why? Because then you're close to whoever you want to see afterwards that you might want to connect with. Okay, so 3 of you out there. I'm Ken Fisher. I'm a performing arts presenter, but this was my 3rd career. I was involved in higher education association work from 1970 to 1978, and then I got a management consulting business that I started in Washington, D.C., and then I wanted to hear a group called the King's Singers from England. And nobody in Washington was interested in presenting them, so I said, well, what the heck, I'll go rent the Kennedy Center Concert Hall and hope I'm successful. And then I did 14 events total between 1983 and 1987, had some hits and some misses. But I had my wife Penny and our little boy called the family council and said, we need more stability and security in this household. You got your consulting business, and we know how that income goes. Now you're in the friggin' arts, Pops, and we know how that goes. Get a job. Get a real job. And so I then became open to the prospect of a job in performing arts management, and that's when the job in Ann Arbor had opened up. And this is the oldest performing arts presenting organization connected to a university. I was really not qualified for this job. I'd never put together a season. I knew how to say Shostakovich, Ditier, Rostropovich. So I had enough background being an Interlaken kid, but also being in a family of professional musicians. But I got this job, but I didn't know really what to do. I hadn't curated a season. I hadn't managed a large staff. So I'm just going to tell you what I did was I used conferences. I think that's the best communication device if you're prepared for it. So what did I do in the first 6 months? I went to any conference I could go to, and when I find somebody sitting alone someplace, I'd go over and say, hello, may I talk to you for a minute? And then I'd introduce myself. My name is Ken Fisher, and they say, you're the guy that got that job nobody knows, in Ann Arbor. That's a great gig. Sure, I'll talk to you. But then what I did was I said, who do you consider the 10 best presenters in the United States? Now, performing arts presenters, we don't really compete with one another. We're mainly local. I didn't find one person hesitant to share with me who they thought the best presenters were. So imagine, after 3 conferences, I'd seen about 60 people, okay? Because I wasn't hesitating sitting down and talking to them. So what happened after these meetings? I had 16 or 17 people that appeared on a whole lot of lists, and I determined this will be my faculty. Because I learn best from people that are smarter than I am and have been around longer. And so I made a point of meeting these people. So within the first 2 years in the field, I had built a relationship with those people that others considered the best in the business. And then I listened. I went to visit them. I asked a whole lot of questions. And that's my networking story, because these then became not only professional colleagues, but very close friends. And a number of them were from the International Society for Performing Arts, which is an international organization. And I got to tell you, once we build a relationship, because I'm going to be here all day tomorrow and afterwards, My friends in Singapore, in Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, London, if they learn that a friend of mine appeared in their town and they weren't informed by me that they were there so that they could host them properly, they'd get very upset. You understand what I'm saying? So Benson Ply in Singapore, any of you going to be going to Singapore and I don't know about it, to be able to tell Benson that you're there, I'm in deep trouble. You understand what I'm saying? Thank you very much. Oh, the other thing, when I'm asked about, what's really important in leadership, the 10th and most important is surround yourself with young people. Listen to them. Be available to offer advice if they want it. And then it's be kind to them because you never know, one day you might be working for them. 20 years ago, I met Aaron Dworkin. I became his mentor, okay? And for the last 20 years, we've had a special relationship. Then he becomes dean of the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance. Now, he's not my boss, but he controls every facility I'm trying to get access to. Be kind to those. You get the point. Thank you.
Awesome. So I have 2 more questions for our panel, but then it's going to be your job to ask questions. We have a microphone up here, but I just wanted to put you on notice that this is a working conference, working session. So we're going to have a conversation. So think about what you might ask to keep our conversation going in maybe about 5 or 10 minutes here. But so each of you have described a pretty organic experience, where a friend gave you some advice or you started just asking people. And I think it sounds like you sort of did it by instinct, just connecting with people, listening to people, trusting people. Can you in this, your experience now that you're a few years out from some of your stories, have you sort of come up with any principles or guidelines or sort of theories about networking, about just sit in the front row, or any kind of rules or tips that you have that you could share with us about sort of what seems to work for you in terms of networking? Kyle, you want to start us off?
I'm still thinking. I don't know if I have a cardinal rule. I think, and it's been stressed, in the talk last night with Dr. Dworkin and the moderator, the wonderful interviewer, and it was, listen to people, that you trust, and never, hearing an opinion is something that can go one way or the other, and you have to have confidence in yourself to recognize when something is truly worth listening to. And I think that, we have so much noise coming our way. You've got to believe in your judgment. And if you have really, really bad judgment, I suggest getting some help. I don't know. But no, I mean, there has to be a real self-belief, a self-confidence that you can filter out and understand and take to heart what's really, really good for you, and something that's going to help you grow and really, help you make the right decisions, because, that there are a few decisions in your life that are going to, carve a path for you one way or the other, and it's important to make the right ones.
I think those are some pretty good points. For me, I kind of go back to my experience, and I hear a lot of times, especially from young people that I work with, that they have this end goal, right? They have this this person, this celebrity personified or something that they want to reach, whether it's a teacher or someone that they want to collaborate with, something like that, right? So as far as networking goes, how do we get to this person? And in my experience, it's really starting to work within your own immediate network, because you never know how cultivating your own immediate sphere of influence is going to get you to that person. Your people can beeline you to the guy that you want to get to, or the girl you want to get to. So I guess for me, that's kind of what has resonated a lot. Cultivate your network. cultivate networking within this room. Within, there are people here that are just a wealth of knowledge and value. So it's not just valuing one person up here and then everyone else's value is down here. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Yeah, just making sure that and be genuinely interested in dialogue with other people, because there's so much information that you can find out. Be yourself, just genuinely interested and having an open and responsive dialogue. Not this kind of surface like, yeah, great, yeah, the weather's fine, yeah, and not eye contact, engage, those kinds of things.
I would think about where you are right now. You're at a conference. You've made a decision to spend the money to get here. I think there are almost 300 Sphinx alumni. And I just see conferences as the greatest possible communication device. That think of the privilege of your being at a place where, 400 or 500 people have chosen to be here at the same time, and you have each of them as an opportunity to learn from and get to know. When I had a staff member come back from a meeting and say to me, oh, it was boring, I said, you and I need to talk. Because that's not a reflection of the conference, that's a reflection of you and your inability to take advantage of everybody that's been at that meeting. Now, what are some of the things you can do to enhance it? First of all, I think sit up front. Then you're listening. You're not dealing with your phone in the back, okay? Another is your badge. Badges right now are often dangling near the you-know-what. Always put it up so it can be seen, okay? These are a fairly good length here. If you're a guy, never put it on the left, put it on the right. Because when you're shaking hands with people, they're looking there. They're not looking around the corner, okay? This is fundamental stuff, okay? When you're introduced to somebody, say something back to them that reminds you of what their name is and how it's pronounced. And don't be afraid to say, can you say that again? How do you say that, and how do you spell it? I get more comments now from people that say, Fisch, he seems to know everybody, but he also knows how to say my name. You have here, where's Jonathan Kuskoski, okay? Say it right first, then spell it, okay? But everybody says, Ken, how'd you get his name right? Well, just spend a little bit of time. Nobody loves it more. Then the other thing, with email right now, you have the opportunity to introduce people to one another through an intro email. I do it all the time. Jonathan, I really want you to meet Mark, okay? You provide how they can be in touch with the other, but then, I want to introduce two great guys to one another, and here's why. To Jonathan, then you write stuff about Mark, okay? To Mark, here's stuff about Jonathan. Then at the end, here's how you can be in touch with each other, and then here's why it's important that you connect. They don't forget that you're the guy that's done that for them, but you've added so much value in making sure that two people who ought to know each other are knowing each other. The other thing, of course, is permission marketing. Permission marketing is, I always carry with me a bookmark of my season, okay? Brochures, nobody wants to carry a brochure around, but you give them, a bookmark, and then I have my business card in this pocket. But I've learned over the years, as I'm talking to somebody, would you like my card? Then they tell you that yes or not. And then, may I give you a bookmark of our season? Because what happened early on at conferences, folks would come up with their CDs and hand it to you like that. And then you get bogged down with a whole lot of stuff that you never really look at back home, or you can't lug it back and so on. But permission marketing is really important. It's not everybody wants to connect, okay? So I just find it easier. So those are a couple of hints. Oh, and by the way, on conferences, Tom Peters wrote a book over almost 40 years ago called In Search of Excellence. And in it was a philosophy about management by walking around, management by walking around. And I have followed that advice. So, it was very important when I took over the job at UMS, which is literally in an ivory tower, a big Carillon tower, get out of the tower and into the communities of Southeast Michigan, communities of shared heritage, educational, corporate, and so on. But that notion of just getting out and around and walking around, and longer than that book was written in 1982. I wrote a book back in 1979 called Little Big Winners, 77 Ideas for a Better Conference. I found a few in my basement. And I brought them, and I put them out on the back table, and they're yours if you want them. But the whole heart of this thing is participation. Why are we set up theater style in conference rooms when what people want to do is meet each other? So set up in round tables. Why do we rely on a keynote speaker when the knowledge is in the room? Okay? But check out Idea 27. Remember, I wrote this in 1979. Idea 27 is every conference should have a Facebook. Could I have a pat on the back, please? Every conference should have a Facebook. And it's so obvious. What people want to do is they want to meet each other. So then design a way for it to happen. This was before computers and, but it was an idea of, take photos of people. Ask them, what are the 5 things you want to learn at a conference? What are the 5 things you can contribute? And what else do you want to do? Do you want to run? You want to go to the show? You want to play poker and so on? And so at conferences that I was involved in, if we didn't get this stuff in advance and print it up, we'd take Polaroids of people and display it at the conference because that's what people want to do. They want to make connections.
That's great. What I just wanted to point out, I've known Ken for a long time. I teach at the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater and Dance. I run the Excel program there with Dean Dworkin. And one of the things I've always found is that if I want to really help a student, the one thing I do is send them to Ken Fisher. One of the things Ken didn't really point out, and I think it's really common to all 3 of our stories here, is that networking is not about getting, it's about giving. Right? If you want to know how to meet 3 people and you're sort of interested or nervous about what you're going to do at this conference to meet 3 people, the thing you should do is introduce yourself to one of these 3 people. Because each one of them will introduce you to another 3 people. And I've watched Ken do this year after year after year with our students. He finds incredible, very genuine personal satisfaction about making connections with the people around him. So for him, it's a very natural, organic thing. And it's not, hey, what will you do for me? Or I'll do this for you if I can get something out of it. That's never in the equation. The equation is always, how can I help you? How can I make the arts world a little bit better? I see a possibility if I put Mark and Jonathan together, that there's something magical that'll happen for the planet. And that karma is going to come back to me. I don't know how. I'm not worried about it. But the networking is essentially a giving act, not a taking act. And I think that's one of the real, they haven't said that, but that's clearly what their example is showing.
That's so true. He literally did that on our call,
Yes.
on our conference call. So he's absolutely right.
So before we open this up for question, I just want to ask our panelists another issue just about diversity, equity, inclusion, racial issues. How conscious are you, since we're at a conference that's largely trying to diversify the arts, it's trying to make it more inclusive, how conscious are you with your networks about making it a colorful network? Or maybe another way at coming at this story from the other angle would be, are there particular issues of diversity that you think are challenges to networks and networking that we really need to think more about to break down some of these barriers that, particularly in our world today, these walls seem to be going up? And how do we make sure that those don't get in the way of the arts world?
Fantastic question. And, the one thing I can say is that my attitude towards yesterday's, when Dr. Dworkin was saying, I'm the only one here. I think any artist or any young man going through life, you approach it, you see it differently. When I was a student, I got frustrated with that, and it was like, why am I the only one? I didn't want to embrace the opportunity that was giving me to, yes, I'm the only one, but you know what, maybe next year when I come back, maybe I won't be the only one. You know, maybe I should take the opportunity to play as much chamber music as possible, because yes, I'm the only one, but every audience that I touch sees this only one, and something in them changes every single time. And as I've gotten older, I view it as just the best opportunity. I think one of the best things that I can give back is just the mindset, and to watch that shift. And when the next time they see a young man, young woman on the street, they realize, wow, you know, they can do that too. I never really thought of it that way. And, you know, as I said at the beginning, you know, you can go through life one way or the other. You can make a path for whichever way you see fit. And I kind of decided that striving for inclusion, you know, is the best thing that I can do. And, you know, you can't think about how small you are, but you can only think about how wide of a net can you cast, how can you change people's hearts and their minds. And that's kind of, as of right now, that's where I sit. And I'm happy with it, and nothing's ever gonna be perfect, but you know, you can't give up and say that it's not gonna get any better, because otherwise it's only gonna get worse, because you're not doing what you can to make it better for all of us, so.
Aaron spoke to this yesterday when he was kind of talking about our story. Everybody has a story, everyone has a journey, and when you think about storytellers, everyone tells a story differently, right? So, I mean, I think that diversity is so powerful, and it's so key to being able to move forward. And as far as String Candy is concerned, for those of you who aren't as familiar, the company basically is a boutique contracting agency. So we hire musicians, primarily string players, because I'm a violinist. So, but all musicians, I've hired full orchestra, singers, guitar, all that stuff. So for different placements in primarily television and film. So we've done a lot of award shows and things like that, late night TV. So for me, in my experience with String Candy, and I'm just speaking to diversity in that regard, a lot of contractors in the industry are white male. That's the reality of it. It's very rare to find female contractors. They exist, but it's a very, very small minority. And contractors of color are also very, very rare. So the type of representation that you see as far as musicians in TV and film placements, and I'm talking about, you'll start to see more of it now, because I think there's a big conversation surrounding diversity, which I think is really, really great. But I mean, there's so many opportunities for that type of representation, and visibility is power, because it's not that the talent does not exist, but if people are not seeing it, then they're being conditioned to believe that it's not there. So for me, that was kind of why I decided to do that, because I don't have an MBA. I didn't go to school for business or anything like that. And it's not like I decided to say, oh, today I'm just gonna start a business and, you know, contract people. It was, for me, kind of more out of necessity than anything. And I think that's how a lot of businesses start, right? At like finding a need and meeting that need. But as that, again, like just speaking to that, I think that making sure that, for me, making sure that young people are able, young and old people, but the next generation can see what's possible, because they have to be able to see themselves reflected, right? Because I spoke to so many young people who say that they want to be, or I'll say young black boys. Okay, I used to teach in New York City public schools, so I would have conversations with them. Like, okay, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be a ball player. I want to be a rapper. I mean, sometimes you'll hear fireman or police officer, or some, like a profession that they've seen within their family, right? Something that is realistic to them, right? So visibility allows them to see, okay, I can do that. So and this is, again, just kind of speaking to that. Diversity as visible as possible, I think, is something that we really need to strive for, and I'm trying to work toward that as well.
Thank you. I just need to take a moment here to celebrate the person. This is Aaron Dworkin right over here. Aaron, put up your hand. If you haven't met Aaron, But why am I doing that? Because it was a little over 20 years ago that I had the opportunity to meet him and to hear his story. And then I just look at this room, I look at what we're going to be experiencing for the rest of our time together, and then that wonderful concert that'll be on Sunday. And I've learned so much from Aaron, from Afa, and from all the people that have gathered over these last 20 years. So I just want to acknowledge that. I also want people to know Willie Sullivan of the University Musical Society staff. Willie, stand up. Willie was an intern. He's a voice. Just keep up. Stay up. He was a voice major, graduated, went on. He now works full time for UMS, and he's here because he wants to meet all of you. And he's just a great guy, and I can do that from where I'm sitting. So, but the most important lesson that I learned was, and just to step back a second, we were an old organization, mainly whites on our board, mainly white people on our staff, and doing Western classical music, and a nod here and there to jazz. But diversity was something that we desperately needed for our organization. And so we were able to bring in a diversity consultant named Gwen Cochran Haddon. Remember that name, 3 words, Gwen Cochran Haddon. And with a little money we had from the Association of Performing Arts Presenters, we brought in this woman who was on the board of Reebok, on the board of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And she spent the morning with our staff, the afternoon with our board, and then we all gathered together to hear her advice. And imagine a rectangular table where all of us are sitting around, and she's at the head, and we're all waiting for the pronouncement. And you know what she says? Start where you are. Thank you very much. Start where you are. And what she was saying is, as I've listened to you today, what I've recognized is you've taken no time to get to know the people that are already in your organization. People you've ignored, where you haven't sought to engage. Start there. And singing in the chorus of UMS and attending our concerts was a woman named Letitia Bird. And as I got to know Letitia, I went to her home, and there were 30 canvas bags, each of a different color, of organizations in which she was a volunteer. And yet, an organization in which she was very active had not invited her participation. So we sought to change that, and we did. And in 1997, when the Ann Arbor News had the opportunity to name its first Citizen of the Year, they named Letitia Bird. And when you're going to start something like that, it's going to be an annual award, you start at the top. And recognizing that this person had been a part of our family for 20 years, and we hadn't engaged her. Now, all that's changed, but the advice of start where you are, because we could have started with a more prominent person who had no connection with us, okay? But it was Letitia, deep connection, just waiting to be invited. It was just amazing.
That's a fantastic story. Questions? You're on. You got the microphone right there. All right. Aaron.
I was just going to share a quick thing. I was talking with Afa, and she said you should just share this quick networking story. And part of the reason I think is because a lot of times people think, oh, networking, and will it actually deliver on things? And there's countless cases with all of our experiences that we've had, Ken. But Sphinx has had the opportunity to have some connections with the White House, the former administration, and the quick networking story that's associated with that is that we had no interactions with the White House, with the administration, with President Obama whatsoever. He was running for office originally, and I learned that he had an arts policy committee just through the news, and first presidential candidate to have an arts policy committee, and so I was like, I should serve on that committee. I didn't know anyone on the committee, obviously didn't know Senator Obama, nothing like that. So I researched and tried to see if I could build a contact or network, and I couldn't. And so I wanted to share that even if you can't do something through a network, you can start your own network. Right. So I researched the committee, didn't know any of the committee members. They were all just two bigwigs. But then I realized that I could find the coordinator for the committee. So I found the coordinator for the committee, and I reached out to them. I researched their email. Very easy online these days to get somebody's email. Researched their email, and in that email I shared the biggest people that I knew, at the time and said, here are people I know, and you may not know me, but here's what I do, and here's what I think I could bring to the committee. 2 weeks later, they had vetted me out enough to join the committee. And at that point, I began networking with every single person on that committee, especially the co-chairs, who were, of course, very, very close to, at that time, Senator Obama. Those things then led to the opportunities that relate to Sphinx, White House, a whole host of unfolding activities. And so there isn't a magic and there isn't a mystery. It is absolutely possible to network with whatever people or institutions can bring about the goals and dreams that you have. And you don't need to have some existing connection to do it. So I just wanted to kind of share that.
Yeah. Fantastic. Betsy.
Hi, my name is Betsy. I'm working here with Sphinx. I've worked with you guys already today. I wanted to ask a quick question. When I was a younger person, I used to sort of be like, I got a network. I'm going to just like throw everything out everywhere and cast a wide net and try to talk to everybody and know everybody. And for a while, there was a discussion of someone making T-shirts that say, I know Betsy, because everybody knew me and, wide net. But now I have a 2-year-old. And I can no longer do things like go to every single party or go to every single event or go to every single conference and meet with everybody. And so I was curious for your thoughts about what are some of the most, maybe top 3 really focused ways to be the most effective when it's possible to do those things, now that I sort of have to reduce the quantity and go for quality.
So quality networking. I think, Stephanie, as I recall in our conversation, you had something to say about that.
So in my experience, and I've actually had friends that, got married and have families and all those things, email works. I start with email because I know there are times where you don't have time to be on a 1-hour call, and it's like, okay, girl, yeah, okay, bye, right? So with email, people really like to know that you are really interested, right? So if you are going to say, listen, I really want to be in touch with someone and I really don't have a lot of time, but email will give you time to actually draft a thoughtful message without feeling rushed or, anything like that. If you have the opportunity to pick up the phone and call, it's very personable. Those are ways that I can think. A third way, I have to be better with thank you cards, but, sending out quick little thank you cards or just a quick connect like, hey, just wanted to check on you, or, just kind of keep in touch, I think really is helpful. I don't know if anybody wants to add something else.
That's great.
No, I would, the written word these days, thank you note, appreciation, is remembered. With the email right now, one of the things that I try to do if I want to friend somebody is that I just don't dump it. I go to Messenger and say, here's why. I'd really like to know you for this or that, so that they have some context. And I'm looking for that if somebody is wanting to friend me. If there's no context or I don't know who they are, what's the purpose behind it? And then follow-up is just really, really critical. And I never blame them. It's the responsibility is mine if I want it to happen. Have good subject lines. And it's also something I do if I'm like meeting with a student who says we really like to get together. I give them permission to kick my butt. I'm busy, and have some fun with it. If you want your home to be remaining standing, then respond, Papa Fisch.
I've told people that I have a toddler that swipes away my notifications on my phone. He'll just take it and swipe them away. So feel free to fire lots of shots
Kyle?
across my bow. It's not offending me at all.
That's great. Thanks, Betsy.
Yep, thank you.
So just encourage, because we have a lot of questions, I want to make sure we get through everybody. Just we'll do concise, to the point, but meaningful questions and answers.
Hi, my name is Garrett McQueen. I'm second bassoon of the Knoxville Symphony Orchestra, and I'm senior programmer, producer, and host of a classical music radio show on the Knoxville NPR radio affiliate station 91.9 FM, WUOT.
Say your name a little slower and your affiliation. That's
Sure.
really important when
Yeah.
Hear it, and that's how you can communicate who you are and where you do and be heard.
Sure.
Step up to the mic.
Sure.
Step up to the mic.
Garrett McQueen, Knoxville Symphony Orchestra, 91.9 FM, WUOT. And that's the voice I use on the radio, by the way. So my question is, how do you traverse people trying to use you as their end? Do you think it's important or necessary or even possible to draw a line between helping as many people as you would like to with being, exclusive enough with your time and your influence to matter to those who you're trying to use as your end?
I would say if someone comes to you and you feel that they have selfish motives, I think you could probably use that against them in the best way that you see fit. I think that everybody could win. Is that answer?
Yeah. So I guess really what my question is, time is very valuable, and we have to use much of our time to help, get ourselves to the next level. So how do you draw the line between doing that and giving somebody else a leg up with your position or your influence?
Ken, I wonder if you can answer this just in terms of all the volunteer work you've done. You've obviously given a lot of time to others.
Sure. You just try to assess the genuineness, draw people out. I think that's one of the most important things is just listen and ask questions, and then that radar will suggest, is this somebody that's really that I can really help? And you just have to get that detector out, because you can't do with everybody. Of course, I've always tried to give a high priority to young people, students at the University of Michigan, emerging people in the field, artists. That's where my heart goes out to, and that's one of the reasons I love this convening every year. And then the competition is who is drawn here, who really cares, and it's just a terrific opportunity.
I totally second that. I would just say, when people approach you with a really genuine spirit, I feel like most times you can really tell. So aside from that, I would just really say you trust your gut, trust your instinct.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the question.
Hi, my name is Daniel Bartholomew Poyser. I'm currently the assistant conductor. Sorry, okay, there we go. I'm currently the assistant conductor of Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony and the community ambassador and conductor for Symphony Nova Scotia. And my dilemma that I need help with, I guess, is that I go to conferences, I enjoy meeting people, and I enjoy exchanging cards, exchanging initial information. But then when I go to say, as I'm embarking on my freelance career, as I do that, I say, here's what I'd like to conduct. And they say, oh, great, we're all booked for next year, but let's talk about 1819 or 1920. So I'm dealing with a problem of scales of time. I feel like I'm planting acorns of information. So how do you negotiate these huge spans of time where people don't need you for a year or 16 months? How do you keep fires stoked over the long term?
Well, I just think persisting, remembering, and when you get that business card, always write down what it is, who this person is, and so on. How many conferences do we go back to? Well, yeah, who's that person? Take photos of folks, that you're with. But I'm looking at Aaron again, and where there was a struggle at the beginning was getting other people to notice how wonderful and unique this organization is, and we just persisted. There was a letter that went to this foundation and that foundation each year till attention was starting to be paid. Now, of course, this group was evolving and awards were coming in and Carnegie Hall concerts were being reviewed and so on. So that all helped, but never giving up on keeping those connections alive, maybe changing the story from time to time. Or I remember you're mentioning that you're all booked for this. So I say, get your name in front of the organization, and gentle persistence. Being a pain in the you-know-what doesn't help anybody, but gentle persistence, practice it, reminding folks. I'll never forget, there's a guy named Tim Walker who at the time managed the Australian Chamber Orchestra. And he practiced permission marketing. And just, he had a great accent, these Australians and stuff like that, but he never forced his stuff on us. When it was time for the Australian Chamber Orchestra to come to the United States, we all booked it. We all booked it. Now, that was maybe 5 years after we met him. But he was a presence at each of these conferences. We knew who he was, but it was gentle persistence, and I would recommend that.
I think the one bit of advice I could offer, I guess, from an entrepreneurial aspect is, is there something you can do to help them or to use them? So is there a project or something you can put together that reaches out and sort of activates your own network as a way to come and help you? So rather than waiting for someone to invite you to their opportunity, can you find a way to create an opportunity and then help other people to be part of it? You'll get to know them more deeply, and you'll have given them something, and they'll really start to value their relationship with you in a different way. So that might be a way to approach it.
I would just say one thing, the question of, tell me about you when you're meeting somebody. We all like talking about ourselves and the things that we're doing, and so then probe and get a little bit more information. That really helps, and then you're getting a repertoire of information that you might then be able to do something with. It might be the response, of how you can be helpful to them, and things go from there. But the showing a real interest in the person that you're meeting and focusing, look at them. So many of us at meetings are looking over your shoulder, who else might be more important to see. Nothing's more important than who you're talking to right there, because you never know what that might lead to. Now, you got to move around a little bit and so on, and there are ways to get out of those situations, but that's called The Art of the Big Fish 2.0.
Thanks for your question. We're going to have time for just a couple more, unfortunately, but
My name is Meredith Riley, and I'm a violinist, former competition alumni. And I wanted to know, so all of you spoke in your personal stories about humble beginnings, or maybe, not knowing who to approach or when. And I'm wondering if there, for instance, in Stephanie's situation, when you made a very gutsy decision to go up to sneak backstage and, put yourself on the radar.
Just sharing a story, guys.
I guess I'm wondering, a lot of times people that are famous that you may want to meet or get on their radar, they get heckled all the time. They get approached, they don't want to be bothered, and you want to be respectful about those wishes. So I guess I'm wondering, how do you know where that boundary is, and how to know when to maybe push it? And you want to put yourself out there, you want to show you're engaged, interested, but you also don't want to bother anybody, so.
Well, just in brief, because I do want to get through as many questions as possible. That's a great question. In my experience, that is absolutely the case. You do not want to be a pain in the behind, because then people want to run the other way. So, and everybody's personality is different. Some people are very chatty, some people are very introverted. So I think that kind of what Aaron was saying, like, there might be times where you can't really find the way. And so you make your own network, and sometimes it's finding out who the contractor is, or finding someone who has worked for that artist, or someone who is within that sphere of influence or in that industry, that's doing that type of work that you're trying to do, whether it's orchestra or chamber music or, mainstream pop music or whatever. And that will kind of nudge you in the direction where you want to go.
Just real quick, I just kind of to add to that, I feel like there's usually a small window, and that, just like you're saying, to find something unusual, something different about yourself that you have to offer. But once within that, you have to be proactive. But that's the hardest thing in the world, to know exactly when that is. And so, just like Dr. Dworkin was saying, sometimes you have to go around. But there's always a chance, there's always a moment where you do have to present yourself. So, there's a chance to Either take a step back or take a step forward, and do your best to find that window and then go for it.
Yeah, I would just point out from Stephanie's perspective that she failed, right? She was going for Erica, and she didn't get to Erica. But she got to someone very close to Erica who was interested in her. And she was smart enough to pass her CD over, even though she was like, this is the only copy I have, and this isn't what I was trying to do. And yet that person who was interested in her ended up making probably more happen than if you had reached your target, right? So we're going to finish up with some homework here. So thank you for the question. For the 4 people who are waiting, your first assignment is to go right backstage and talk to these 3 people immediately following the session, because we don't have time to take your questions publicly. But I did ask our panelists to end today with 2 bits of advice: an assignment for something for you to do at the conference, and then an assignment for something for you to do once you get home. So.
So, okay, two tips, right? Okay, so my suggestion is to, outside of the already pre-assigned homework, which is to meet 3 people, right? 10. Fantastic. Okay, so of those 10 people, I would suggest getting people's email address and their social media, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, that's kind of more on a casual tip, but there's so many, and I said Instagram, Twitter, because there are different ways to connect with people, and sometimes they're not responsive to a phone call, but they're responsive via email. And a lot of times you can kind of see the type of work people are doing. So find out people's social media and share your social media. And I would also say, as you are meeting people, challenge yourself to make sure that you are actively listening and receiving the information that people are giving you. So learn and hear people's names, how to pronounce it, eye contact, and really be in a position to really receive what people are telling you so that you can retain that information.
I only have one homework. And it's funny when you're thinking about these things that they often are self-directed. But I would say to look at what your biggest weakness is in terms of interaction with others and attack that weakness. Turn it into a strength. If you're the shy, meek person, think about ways, how can you get help? How can you gain more confidence? How can you gain more, verbal prose? How can you become the person that you look at in awe? And how can you use that to achieve your goals? Because it's the hardest thing to do, as far as myself goes, is to, and from a musical perspective, that's when you grow the most, is when you turn that glaring weakness and then you work and you work and you work. And anyone who picks up an instrument and knows how to play it really well knows that that's where you make your largest improvement. So if you can apply that to any setting in terms of networking, I think it could be equally as effective.
Well, you've just heard the best advice from these 2 folks. What they said. I would just add, don't leave the front rows empty. Make sure that people can see your badge, okay? And as you're meeting people, permission marketing, practice that. And then at some point, it's either the business card or if you're sharing the information electronically, say how you met this person, if you're going to follow up a little bit more, so that when you go back with this stack of business cards, you don't have to be remembering, oh God, who was that person and so on. Take that responsibility now, so you'll know.
Thank you so much. Thanks to our panel.